paying attention to the world around you when you're retired is really important. And I mean this because we only have so much control over the pieces of our lives that affect retirement. And the more you're on top of things, the better decisions you can make. About 6 months ago, I did a video about the things I was worried about in retirement. And they were largely economic issues, but there were also some other things. I'll put a link in the description to a link to that video. But I thought it would be good to do a mid-year check-in because things have changed somewhat and the world is always uncertain. And I think it's always just good to revisit the decisions that you're making and the state of the world around you. So the things that are top of mind for me have to do with Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, our investment portfolio, the state of the world, and so on and so forth. It doesn't do any good to worry about things that are completely out of your control. You can pay attention to them to understand what's happening. But to spend a lot of time and energy and emotional strife to actually worry about them really is kind of self-defeating. I would rather personally spend my time and energy on the things that I can actually do something about. So I'm going to give you a list of the things that are top of mind for me right now that I'm really paying attention to in case I need to make different decisions. The first thing that comes to mind has to do with medical care. And as many of you know, especially in the US, our government is making a lot of changes. You could argue for better, for worse. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is what's actually going to happen to us. What do we need to be paying attention to? And because we retired early and we're not eligible for Medicare, we are on a state plan, an ACA plan, the Affordable Care Act. And it's been fantastic for us. It's been affordable. It's been fantastic care. But a lot of that is about to change because the federal subsidies to the ACA are going to change significantly in 2026. So what we're doing is I did a little bit of research on our state in particular because it changes, it's different state to state. And for us, that means our medical premiums are going to increase, likely, about 75%. Ouch. That's a big change. And so planning for that ahead of time and budgeting and saving in other areas is important, but we also may reconsider the kind of coverage that we have. If we feel like we're doing relatively well and are relatively healthy, we may decrease our level of care to save on premiums. So, that's where the devil is in the details. You may need to, do your own research, figure out what your situation is if you're on an ACA plan, and understand what kind of subsidies will and will not continue to be available. Medicaid is a whole other issue. If you're on Medicaid, then, pay attention to that too. If you are eligible for Medicare and that's where your coverage comes from, also keep paying attention to that. These are really important issues. I mean, they're not important until they are important, right? And staying on top of them so that you don't have to worry is, I think, the way to go. So that's what we're doing. We will, come 2026, reevaluate our medical care, see what the actual dollar impact will be from the ACA subsidies going away. The second thing that we're paying attention to is also money related, which is our investment portfolio. Now, we're lucky enough to have an investment portfolio, although most of it is in IRAs, which we are, again, not eligible to be drawing from, but that's our future. And so constantly reevaluating the investments that you're in. Do they still make sense? What's happening in the world? So that you can get a good sense of, am I investing appropriately or not for the long term? Now, if you're already of the age where you can withdraw from your IRA, Also evaluating your withdrawal strategy and how much you need to take a year and so on and so forth, which you should be doing anyway. But I think in times that are economically uncertain, it's even more important to pay closer attention to these things so that you don't get taken by surprise. The second piece of life that I'm really paying attention to that is more in our control is reducing expenses. And we did the bulk of that several years ago when we actually retired. But it's always good to be reevaluating. Again, there's going to be a common theme here about reevaluation. And what I mean by reducing expenses is, looking at your subscription plans and making sure you're not spending money you are unaware that you're spending or that you don't need to spend anymore. This kind of feels like a nickel and dime kind of thing, but it all adds up. And the thing that we're focusing more on right now is the concept of reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle. And I don't just mean from a green perspective, although that's super important too. And the happy coincidence here is that you can accomplish both at the same time. But we are focusing a lot more on things like not using as many paper towels as we normally had in the past. And here's a fun sort of, romanticize your life little strategy piece of that. What we've started doing is taking, the fancy quote unquote napkins, cloth napkins that we got from our various travels, mostly in France, some in Spain, and some other places, but using those every single day instead of paper towels. Even if we're just sitting down with pizza, we sit down with our cloth napkins and then you just wash them. And the beauty of that is that not only are you saving, it's threefold really. Not only are you saving money on using paper towels, but you're also saving money on, so you're saving money on paper towels, but you're also getting to use something that is precious to you, something that you enjoy, something that maybe that has memories attached to it, or maybe just that feels better. To use a cloth napkin feels a little bougie. But the third piece of that is that, we're not contributing to a bunch of waste. We are, yes, they have to be washed and there are some ecological impacts of that, but that's the trade-off. And so things like that and paying attention to your day-to-day consumption of even the smaller things and finding all the little ways that aren't so painful to change can really make a big impact and can really make your life actually a little bit better. When t-shirts get stained or ripped or they're just super, super old, instead of just tossing them, we use them as cleaning rags and that sort of thing. And so there are a number of really creative ways to reduce what you're using, to reuse what you're using, and to repurpose what you're using. We're also learning how to fix things instead of, we come from a culture that's very much centered around everything being disposable. And and we're also spending time versus money on learning how to fix things. We live in a very disposable culture, especially here in the US. And when you have extra time, as in retirement, it can really be beneficial to learn how to fix things instead of just tossing them or donating them and buying something else. So we're looking at both, small electronics and furniture and clothing and things that we can mend and fix and upcycle even, as a way to not consume so much, but also as a way to save money. Another way that you can both save some money over time, but also contribute to your health in many ways, is growing your own food. Let's talk about that. Another great way to save money. Now, this is more of a long-term play, actually, but another great way to save money is to learn how to grow your own food. This is a community garden here in my community that is a great solution if you don't have a lot of space where you are. If you're in an apartment, you can still grow some in containers, but if you're looking for something bigger, check and see if your community has a community garden where you can rent a plot. Now, this is more of a long-term play because let's face it, setting up a garden can cost money. You can get really creative and scrappy, and there are lots of really cheap ways to do it. And if you want to go down a real rat hole, not a rat hole, but a rabbit hole on YouTube, do frugal gardening and you will have a lifetime worth of videos to watch. But the reason I bring this up is because growing your own food does a number of things. Not only do you just, buy some seeds and then eventually get the food to eat, but it gets you out in the fresh air. It gets you active and physically working. And it also ensures that you know exactly where your food is coming from. And that's just a better, healthy alternative anyway. So there are a lot of benefits to it. And it's really hard to save money on gardening, if you're going to do it all at once. But if you ease into it over the course of a couple of years, you can get to the point where you're spending very, very little on upkeep and you're literally reaping the harvest from that. So this is something that we are spending more time and energy on in terms of educating ourselves, but also doing what we can with what we have. And the last piece, and for us, this is the biggest piece that we are reevaluating right now and have actually taken steps towards right now, is lessening debt and securing housing for ourselves and for future generations as much as possible. We had a house in the San Francisco Bay Area that for the last 5 years, we have rented out. And that was really great income. But it also came with keeping our massive mortgage. And we decided that based on world events, based on things that are happening, now is the time we really wanted to get out of it. Now, I don't subscribe to the theory that in order to retire, you should 100% pay off your mortgage before you do that, and that's an absolute. I don't. I think every situation is different. And for the last 5 years, this has worked really well for us. But right now, we decided, we put our house on the market, and at the time of this filming, the close on our house is tomorrow. So this is very exciting times for us. But as of tomorrow, we will get rid of the absolute biggest chunk of debt we've ever had in our lives. And there's something very freeing to that. And then what we're doing with that then, now that we've moved to a less expensive place, is looking at solutions to have more land so that we can do things like this, so that we can have not just us, but multiple family members, if needed, live on the same property. And there's a whole benefit to that as well that goes deep into sort of societal benefits and how things used to be when we all lived in a village. And there's some real beauty in that. And so we've decided that that's what we're working towards. And so that's a major financial decision that we've made. And we decided to do it right now. Woo. Garbage truck. And so that's just a brief, really sort of mid-year check-in. Again, I did a video on this 6 months ago with some of the similar issues that I've been thinking about, but a lot has changed since then. And so I wanted to revisit it, not only for me, but for you. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate you liking and subscribing and doing, pressing all the buttons and doing all the things. And let's keep checking in, because paying attention to your future and what's affecting your future, both financially and otherwise, has a big effect on your prosperity and your health and your happiness as time goes on. Thanks a bunch. I'll see you next time. How cool is that? We just saw 2 barred owls out in the wild.
Yeah, they stopped to visit while we were recording.
They did. I love living here.